For those of you who didn't know, I recently got back from a short but sweet coaster trip around Minnesota and St. Louis, Missouri. So now I am obligated to make countdown videos for all three of the parks I went to, which were Valleyfair, Nickelodeon Universe, and Six Flags St. Louis. We're going to kick it off by ranking the 8 operating roller coasters at Cedar Fair's second ever amusement park. I mean, take a hint, that's literally where the chain gets the word fair. Nonetheless, I thought this was a pretty solid little park all around. Of course, it's not going to compare to the company's giants like Cedar Point, Kings Island, or Carowinds, but what it does have on offer is something you've got to respect. For just 8 coasters, it's shocking to me that Valleyfair boasts such a unique and almost obscure lineup. You've got your classic aero coasters in Excalibur, Mad Mouse, and Corkscrew, your wooden coasters in Renegade and High Roller, and your supporting coasters like Steel, Venom, and Wild Thing. So without further ado, let's put all of these rides together and put them in a list from worst to best. As always, if you'd like to support the channel, don't forget to drop a like on the video and subscribe if you're new here. Also, I'd love to see some comments going on about your favorite coasters at Valleyfair. Now, let's dive right in. These are the top 8 roller coasters at Valleyfair in Minnesota. Number 8, Cosmic Coaster. Originally opening at Dorney Park in Pennsylvania, this relocated kiddie-powered coaster has been thrilling younger guests since 2011 at Valleyfair. When approaching this ride, the first thing I thought to myself is, will this have an obnoxious height limitation? Unfortunately, through my travels, I've learned that most Cedar Fair parks will not let you ride their junior coasters if you do not have a kid riding with you. Luckily for this ride, even with it being smaller than many other kids coasters in the chain that do have these rules in place, you do not need a kid to ride. Now, the only reason I like to celebrate this is because us coaster enthusiasts count credits. I was pleased to find out that I could easily obtain this one without having to borrow a kid, which I never do in the first place, or having to request special permission from the park. So if you're attending this park for the first time and you're a credit seeker, be aware that you will be able to grab the park's kids coaster without any issue. Number 7, Mad Mouse. Currently, there are 3 Aero Wild Mouse coasters in operation, and this was my very first one. And much to my surprise, this turned out to be one of the best Wild Mice I've ever experienced. I thought it was very smooth, had a decent layout, and was generally an enjoyable family coaster. Now, I do hear that the other 2 Aero Wild Mouse coasters at California's Great America and Michigan's Adventure run considerably faster than this one. That I can believe since this was running with a few trim brakes, but nonetheless, I wonder if those 2 rides maybe run more like a thrill coaster than a family coaster. I could almost see the potential that Mad Mouse would have with very minimal braking, so that's something I look forward to experiencing at some point in the near future. Number 6, Corkscrew. From one Aero to another, Corkscrew is the park's first thrill coaster to make this list. And while I can't say this one runs too rough, it has a boring layout that takes its elements far too slowly. Since it did open in 1980 and serves as a fully functioning Aero looping coaster, I've got to cut it some slack. Whether you like these rides or not, I think it is important to recognize their impact on the amusement industry. With that being said, Corkscrew doesn't have any elements in particular that are very interesting, but if this is your home park, this may not be a bad idea for a first inverting coaster. It's really not that intense and won't pull any crazy forces, so it should be totally manageable for a younger thrill seeker attempting to work their way up to the bigger rides. As a hardcore enthusiast, however, I can't say that I'll be giving this thing another ride if I someday return to the park. It just isn't really that exciting to me. Number 5, High Roller. The park's oldest operating roller coaster, opening in 1976, is a classic out-and-back woody that appears to be fairly well maintained. There's no denying that it is a pretty rough ride, and parts of it actually do jackhammer a little, but for the ride being this old and giving this much airtime is just excellent. I was fortunate enough to experience High Roller in the back row and got flung out of my seat, declining all of its airtime hills. Unfortunately, as soon as you land back into your seat again, you'll usually have to brace for some aggressive shakiness, but if you can ignore that, High Roller is a great classic coaster. And as a compliment, it's a very unique one too. Its manufacturer, the Opus Group, only ever built one roller coaster, though they were involved in a lot of Valleyfair's early construction. From what I hear, their one and only coaster is rather bipolar though, so let me know in the comments if you are a fan of this ride like I was. Number 4, Wild Thing. The park's tallest, longest, and fastest roller coaster has gained the nickname Mild Thing over time, and this is something I could definitely understand after riding. The biggest issue I have with this ride is its elements are so large and elongated to the point where there is no airtime, no forces, and even the speed feels exaggerated if you aren't in the front row. Now, this is all the case but for one element. After the initial drop, you do traverse a pretty solid floater airtime hill that you take with plenty of speed, and you actually spend most of the element out of your seat. This is the one part of the ride that elevated Wild Thing above High Roller and into the park's top 4 overall roller coasters list in my opinion. For the general public, I'm sure this ride can be seen as somewhat enjoyable, but on the contrary, us coaster enthusiasts consider some of Morgan's hyper designs to be pretty underwhelming compared to all the others. For a ride this huge, it really should not be riding like a smooth mine train coaster, but that's just my take on it. Number 3, Steel Venom. The Intimate Impulse coaster is a model that I personally find to be underrated. Currently, I've been on 3 of them, including 2 of the 4 still operating in North America, rest in peace Wicked Twister. And while all of them are pretty similar overall, I think Steel Venom might be my favorite, at least out of the ones I've ridden currently operating. This is for one specific reason. I think you are all getting the idea here. As of now, Steel Venom is the only impulse coaster out there to continuously use its holding brake. This phenomenon of stalling at the peak of a vertical spike is one of the most bizarre feelings on any coaster I've ridden. Additionally, you can also anticipate the ride's awesome positive G-forces rising and declining either of the 2 spikes. It may be a simple ride with a simple layout, but considering the forces and the uniqueness with that holding brake, Steel Venom is a ride that I hope Valleyfair keeps around for the long run. Number 2, Excalibur. Talk about a ride that's seemingly closed more so than open. I'll admit, I was pretty nervous when rising up Wild Things lift hill and seeing all the coasters here but one rising through their layouts. That one coaster was Excalibur, and it wasn't until about an hour later when we noticed a slow-moving blur ascending a relatively tiny lift hill. So at that moment, we decided to stop what we were doing and even exit the line for the Wild Mouse and run over to Excalibur and try to give it a shot. And not only was the ride open for what we were told was its last weekend of the entire year, but there were about 10 total people in the station when we got there. I personally walked away with 7 total rides, and it wasn't just because it was dead in the station, but also because this ride was fantastic. Its model is known as the Aerodynamics SCS, or Special Coaster System Design. This is essentially one of their mine train coasters, but on absolute steroids. Some of you may be familiar with this model if you've ridden Gemini at Cedar Point or Matterhorn at Disneyland, but Excalibur is a ride of its own breed. I was surprised to ride it in the back and discover that it was more aggressive than both of those 2 rides. Sure, it might be short, but it seems like most of its elements and at least the first 80% or so are delivering strong ejector airtime, strong lateral forces, or strong positive G-forces. These 3 things put into a janky little aero layout was practically a ride straight for my dreams. I recognize that Excalibur may not be for everyone, but this is a coaster that I am forever grateful to have ridden and is easily one of the best classic coasters I've gotten the chance to experience today. Number 1, Renegade. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, as even though Excalibur is a unique powerhouse of an aero, Renegade is an aggressive jam-packed GCI with tons going for it. So much in fact that I think it might be my new favorite GCI I've ever ridden. As you can see through my POV, the ride has some of the manufacturer's finest pacing, airtime, and laterals, at least of their rides in America. And honestly, I wasn't totally convinced after my first ride that this was all too much better than something like Thunderhead at Dollywood or Prowler at Worlds of Fun. But let me tell you, Renegade sure knows how to warm up. Once I got back around to the ride midday, it was hauling through its layout and going to the end of its course unnaturally fast. I have to say, this is one of those rides I would have loved to have closer to me. It seems like the more I rode it, the more I liked it, and I know many of you guys watching can echo my thought process as well. But nonetheless, between the couple of rides I got on Renegade, this is one of the country's strongest and most prominent GCIs by far. There we have it. With 8 operating roller coasters, many of which providing a unique ride experience, Valleyfair has a solid little lineup in their own right. I think many enthusiasts like to disregard some of the smaller parks in the Cedar Fair chain, but I don't think this should be the case. Valleyfair should not be compared to a place like Cedar Point, and instead should be valued based off of the rides and experiences that it has to offer. But with that, I'd love to hear in the comments if you agree with my rankings and how you'd stack up these rides against each other. Also, if you enjoyed today's content, I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next countdown video. Bye guys.